Hello and welcome back to our tutorials. So we're going to have a look at this Blender 2.8. It's only an early version of it, so hopefully we won't have too many bugs. So we can right click on our light, our cube and our camera. So what we're going to do is look at a technique called UV unwrapping, which is the process of putting a two-dimensional image, like a normal JPEG or a normal picture, onto a three-dimensional object. So eventually what we'll want to do is say take the photograph of a person's face and take that photograph and wrap it around a 3D mesh of their face. But what we're going to do is start with some simple versions of that. So I'm going to delete the cube here by pressing the delete key, and I'm going to go add mesh plane. So this is going to be my plane. And I want to start by putting an image, a picture onto this plane, and then we'll sort of build up into a more complex version of this. So if you remember from the last class, we had sort of solid mode, material mode and shaded mode. And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to the material, and we have our default material here. So this material is what comes with the cube in Blender, so the default material. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to call this 2D plane, so I know what I'm dealing with here. Now what I'm going to start with, I'm going to click on shading, this tab up here, and you can see that this is my 2D plane, and then these are my nodes. So I've got my principal shader and I've got my output. Now if I change the color, my base color, you can see my base color change. I can see the textured version of it and the rendered version. So what I want to do is I want to add a picture onto this. So to do that I need to go through a process called unwrapping. So I'm going to go to UV image editing here. So we're starting to use some of these rooms or these tabs up the top. So I'm going to change into edit mode, and you can see by default, so this is one of the sort of standard shapes in Blender, like you've got cubes and spheres and pyramids, etc. So this corresponds to this plane over here. So I'm going to open my image that I'm going to use over here. So I'm going to click open and go to my desktop and select this picture here of the world. So here's my picture. I'm just going to zoom out. Now this image here, we want to place that onto our plane. So let's go back to shading. Now we need to plug this image into our shader. So to do that we go add texture, image texture, and then we could hit open, but because we've already loaded it into Blender, we can just pull the drop down menu and select the image here, and then take the color output and plug it into the base color here. Now what we're seeing is the picture on the plane. Now we can change how the specularity of the plane and the roughness of the plane, or it's how metallic it is. But all we're interested in really for this tutorial is having a look at how do we get images onto 3D objects. Okay, so that's how we got our how we work with a plane. So we started with a flat plane. We went into edit mode and we went here to UV image editing. We loaded in with image open, and we loaded in our image, and then in our shading tab we added in this image node or texture node here. So let's go back just to UV image editing for a minute and see how this works. So let's go to object mode for a second and turn on our shading. Okay. actually, let's go back here. So this doesn't seem to be showing us what we want to see. So we'll go back to modeling. Okay, so I don't know why that image didn't come up first time. It's jumped in and out of edit mode and it loaded the image in. Okay, and maybe it'll do the same if I go back here. Oh, there we are. Perfect. So in UV image editing, what we want to do is we want to go into edit mode. The reason I want to do that is because, not because I want to change the shape here, but because I want to show you how it works over here. So when all of these verts are selected in the 3D viewport, they're also selected over here, or they're available to move. So if I select this one and press G, you can see that the positioning of the image has changed. So let's say I wanted just Australia on my plane. I can right click on each of these verts and move them so that it's just Australia that's shown here. Or I could decide I only want South America. And all I'm doing is right clicking on the verts and pressing G to move them, and then I can position these verts here. So in this UV image editing room, or in this setup, what I can do is I can take this 2D image and then select the part of it that I'm interested in to be displayed on the plane. So let's go back to the full image. So let's put them up in the corners. And hopefully you can see how extraordinarily versatile that is and how powerful it is in real time to be able to move around an image to fit onto a 3D model. So let's go back to modeling, and we'll go to object mode, and we're just going to move this. We can go G, X, and just move this out of the way. Now what I'm going to add in is a UV sphere. And with this UV sphere, I'm going to go into edit mode and go over to my UV image editing. And we can see here that it has, because this is a default shape in Blender, it has already unwrapped. It's like divided this 3D object, it's cut it up into 2D. So if you look at this here, you can see that the very top of this sphere is triangles, and hence we can see lots of triangles at the top. And the rest of these are quads. They all have 4 verts, which is all the squares, and then we've got more triangles at the bottom. Do note, however, that, for example, all these squares are the same, whereas the surface area of the squares here is not the same. So a square at the what will be our equator is larger than one here. That's very different shape. And yet over here it's sort of expressed, they're all the same, they're all squares. So this is not a perfect solution. We could go in and try and manually change these to reflect their relative size here, and that might get us more success. We're not going to do that now, but that's the sort of thing that will make an image more, or a 3D model more realistic or more appealing. So why can't we see our image here? Well, because in our, well, I can just do this here very quickly. We haven't applied a material to this object. So go to our materials tab, and we'll just use the existing 2D plane. Now that we can see that the Earth has been applied, well, the picture of the Earth has been applied to the sphere. Okay, so now we have our sphere. Okay, now I was going to very quickly jump to shading, and we're going to have a look at one of the features that we can play with here. So we're going to have a look at what's called a normal map. Now I'm going to take this node here, and I'm going to go Control C, Control V. I've duplicated it. And what I want to do is I want to plug it into this thing here called normal. But before I do that, I'm going to add a what do I want to add? I want to add a shader. Where are you hiding from me? I'm looking for a normal map. There's normal map there, so it's under vector. So I'm going to add a normal map. I'm going to add the color from this in here. Now I'm not interested in the color information, so I'm going to say non-color data. I'm going to take the output from here and put it there. Now what I want you to try and see, if you can, is that we should get bumps. Basically we're making a bump map. So as I increase the strength here or decrease the strength, we should be able to see sort of terrain on this. That's not going to make a huge difference, but it should give it fool it into the appearance sorry, of it having some sense of being three-dimensional as opposed to being completely flat. So it should interact with the light a lot better. Okay, now we'll have a look at our lights in a minute to see if we can get them to complement each other. Okay, so we'll be doing quite a bit of work on these later on in the year, so don't worry too much about the texturing for now. So what we've got here, if we go back to our modeling room, is we've got our plane and our sphere, and we've UV unwrapped them, and we've placed an image on the whole sphere, and in this case the whole plane. So let's just take the sphere here and go GX and move it to the right. And let's see if we can. I'm going to go Shift S and go cursor to center, and then I'm going to add Shift A, add mesh cube. So what I want to do here is I'm going to make a new material for this cube, and I'm going to call this red. And let's make it red. So our cube is red, but I want to have one face of the cube be blue. So what we've got here in this area here, we've got a plus and a minus, and these are basically layers of materials that we can add to this cube. So I'm going to add another layer, and this layer is empty, so we'll go new. We'll call this blue, and we'll make it blue. Now no blue has been added to this cube, it's still red, and that's because we haven't told Blender what part of the cube to make blue. So we're going to go into the edit mode, and we're going to select a face. So this is vertex select, edge select, and face select. So I'm going to right click on this top face, and you can see while I'm in edit mode I've got these new buttons here: select, deselect, and assign. So I'm going to select my blue color, and with this face selected here I can go assign, and now that's my blue color. Select this face and assign. Oh no, I have to select blue first and then assign that. Now I can go back out into object mode. So now I have an object that has two separate materials. One's called red and one's called blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my shading here, and if we are in materials, we've got red and we've got blue. So I'm going to select blue, and what we'll do here is we will, for the blue color, we'll add in, so add texture, image texture, and we'll add in our picture, and we can see that that is spread over the blue area here. But if we go to UV image editing and we go into edit mode, you can see that this face and this face are in two separate places. So if I select them both together, which I hold down the shift key and right click, so they're both selected, they're not sort of complementary here. So let's take this one, and we're just going to right click on this vertex and go G, move that down there, G, and place that there. I'm going to try and roughly guess the middle. Well, it's not liking me doing that, so let's see if we can get this to work, or if I've inverted the world. I may have inverted the world. No, that works. So now what we've got is we've got our two faces unwrapped separately to the rest of the cube. and we've got a picture spread over just those two faces. And if I wanted it just spread over one face and not, you know, the world on each one, I can select this face here and go U, unwrap. And now it's here separately on its own, so I can go G, and same here, G. And now when I select this face, this is on its own, so I can do the same with this. I can press the G key and the G key. And now I've got the world here, and red everywhere else. And if I wanted, I could create a third material and have a completely different image. And I would have to have a different image loaded in here, and that way I could have a different image on this face. So if you can imagine, you've got a character, like a complex model, and it has, you know, a coat and a belt and a hat and a face and hair and all these different components. You're going to be using an array of different images, 2D images of different photographs of cloth and of leather, of skin, etc., and applying those images to different parts of your model to make them look more realistic and more, you know, to resemble the objects that you want them to be. Okay, so this is what we're going to do in class. We're going to take a plane, a cube, and a sphere, and we're going to unwrap them, although they come kind of unwrapped already in this version of Blender, and then we're going to apply these images to them and see how much we can control. And we'll leave it there for now.